Part 81. The Battle of Uhud. While Badr was an impromptu war, Uhud was a pre-planned attack. Abu Sufyan, who later converted to Islam, narrated that as soon as the Quraysh returned from Badr, they began to plan Uhud. Abu Sufyan took Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl and Safwan ibn Umayyah, sons of the two biggest names that died at Badr, and approached every household that contributed to last year's caravan. Abu Sufyan knew how much each participant made, and he demanded the prophets back to fund their offensive against the Muslims. Allah references this in Surah 8, Al-Anfal.
Surely the disbelievers spend their wealth to hinder others from the path of Allah. They will continue to spend to the point of regret. Then they will be defeated, and the disbelievers will be driven into hell. Surah 8, verse 36.
As explained Surah 8, Al-Anfal was revealed after the Battle of Badr, and so Allah not only exposed the Quraysh's plot as they were planning it, He predicted their imminent downfall. Their motives for the war were threefold. First, their religious animosity towards Islam was increasing. Second, they suffered socially and were desperate to save face, yearning for revenge. And third, their economy had capitulated and would continue to suffer greatly without the trade route to Syria. Uhud was therefore a last-gasp attempt to restore the Quraysh to their pre-Islamic norms. After suffering a major loss in personnel, they required support and thus approached neighboring tribes who would equally benefit from reopening the Syrian trade route, the tribes of Kanana and Tihama. The Battle of Uhud was a major step in shifting the paradigm from Muslims versus the Quraysh to Islam versus Kufr. Lines were drawn in the sand, and sides were chosen. Recalling the boycott of Banu Hashim, there were many non-Muslims included in the self-imposed exile. Now, non-Qurayshi tribes are including themselves in a war against the Muslims. On the 7th of Shawwal 3 after Hijri, the Quraysh and their allies set out from Mecca. The total combined force was 3,000 fighting men, 700 with armor, and 200 on horseback. They even brought 24 of their women to further incentivize them not to fail in their endeavor. Abu Sufyan led the army and appointed Khalid ibn al-Walid on the left flank and Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl on the right. As soon as the Quraysh left, Al-Abbas sent a trusted servant to inform the Prophet. Al-Abbas expressed his iman to the Prophet after Badr, but it is theorized that he returned to Mecca as a secret Muslim, formally converting in public at the conquest of Mecca. The benefits of his clandestine belief in Mecca are clearly demonstrated in this example, where he was able to notify the Prophet of major developments. The messenger raced to Medina, and as a lone rider was able to overtake the army. He reached the Prophet, who asked Ubay ibn Ka'b to read the letter and instructed him to keep the contents top secret until further notice. The Prophet rushed home and met with senior members of the Ansar, then sent out some spies to confirm the news. The Prophet did not distrust Al-Abbas, but the developments were so significant that wisdom would dictate one act with caution and avoid hastiness. The Prophet's conduct is once again a vital lesson for the believer. Owing to Al-Abbas's forewarning, the Prophet had 2 days to act. He convened a general meeting after the Friday prayer, informing everyone of what was taking place and asking for their input. The Prophet suggested that they fight from within the city, as Medina was a naturally protected area. To the east and west were large volcanic plains. To the northwest were the plains of Uhud, and to the southeast was the area of Quba, which contained large date palm farms. Fighting within the city would naturally give advantage to the residents of the city who are familiar with its layout. Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul agreed with the Prophet. Notwithstanding his resentment of Islam, he was indeed a seasoned warrior and thus understood the benefits of this plan. He said, "Medina has never been successfully attacked when fought within. However, there were a group of younger, zealous companions who were eager to fight. They said,
'Why should we remain in our houses like cowards? Rather, we should go out and fight on the battlefield.'"
They deeply regretted missing out on Badr and wanted to display their valor. They continued to encourage and push the Prophet to go out, and the senior companions remained silent on the matter, so the Prophet sided with the majority vote and proceeded to wear his armor. When the prophet went inside to gather his armor, the senior companions began reprimanding the youngsters.
The prophet told us his opinion, and yet you persisted in suggesting the opposite until finally he agreed.
The younger companions felt remorseful and requested Hamza to inform the prophet that they changed their mind. The prophet, already dressed in full armor, said, "It is not befitting that a prophet takes off his armor after wearing it until he fights the enemy." This incident demonstrates the prophet's insistence on consulting his companions. Despite being confident in the plan to remain in Medina, he acquiesced to the majority because he understood the importance of a unified force. The incident also reveals the outstanding etiquette of the senior companions. They did not voice their disapproval until the prophet left out of respect and reverence. Indeed, they had accompanied the prophet for over a decade prior and had learned these soft skills directly from the fountain of prophethood.